Hey, y'all. Welcome to the CPA Exam series of the WERKin Mommas podcast. I'm Nikki. Thank you for tapping in and supporting this podcast and all of my CPA exam content. The WERKin Mommas podcast was originally all about my frolics and frustrations of being a mama to two growing kids. But like most moms out here, there's other hats that I wear. I'm a CPA, I work in corporate America, I run my own businesses. And so I wanted to have conversations about the CPA exam for candidates, talk about business and tax tips for entrepreneurs, share career advice from my perspective as a Black girl working in an industry where I'm part of the 1% and not in a good way. And of course, getting real about money and credit and unlearning some of the things that we as Black kids saw and adopted as the truth. So, my podcast is a labor of love for me. I enjoy sharing CPA exam tips and tricks and all that I went through with the exam in hopes that my experiences will inspire you to keep going, no matter how hard or how impossible this journey seems right now. I'm here to tell you it is so worth all of the stress and frustration that you may be feeling. There's lots more CPA exam coaching, practice exams, simulations, tutorials online at winstoncpagroup.com/CPA exam. There's a virtual classroom where you can access all of my content, my notes, my tutorials, these premium podcast episodes, and more in the virtual classroom. Check it out online. I also post CPA exam tips on LinkedIn, so make sure we're connected over there. And as you listen to this episode, if something resonates with you or is super helpful to you, let your networks know that you're tuned in to this exclusive CPA exam series of the WERKin Mommas podcast. Feel free to share on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook and tag me at Nick Winston CPA. So let's jump into this episode. My struggles with the CPA exam manifested into the only Black-owned and woman-owned CPA exam review course designed to prepare candidates for both the CPA exam and their accounting careers once they receive their license. Do you love this content? Well, help create more of it. Support this podcast and the CPA exam virtual classroom at buymeacoffee.com/Nick Winston CPA. When you go to the site, click on the support button, and from there, you can buy as many cups of coffee or tea as you like. And feel free to leave a comment and tell me what you like most about the WERKin Mommas podcast. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/Nick Winston CPA and help create more of the content you love. Hey, y'all, and welcome back to the CPA exam series of the WERKin Mommas podcast. I'm Nikki, and I'm here to share with you the things I did to pass the CPA exam. I've used all of the review courses, did all of the highlighting and mnemonic memorizing, but none of that was working for me. So I spent all this time studying, weeks and months, only to feel like I didn't know anything when it was time to take my real exam. So I started doing things differently and learning accounting instead of memorizing things. I switched up my whole study strategy, and I passed my last 3 exams that I needed credit for in 6 months. So how did I answer multiple choice questions, work through simulations with confidence, and feel prepared on exam day? I'm sharing with you all of that and more in these exclusive episodes. Today we're talking about how to organize your study materials. And here's some important things to keep in mind if you're not sure how to organize. First, most of the review courses, when you purchase the program, you get books, you get video lectures, you get a test bank, maybe some flashcards, some other things that have been added to the package. But because the programs are basically plug and play, once you pay for the program, they give you everything and it's up to you to figure out how to use this stuff. And that alone can be overwhelming, more so than the exam itself is like, okay, I just spent money for these study materials and I'm not even sure where to start or which section I should be studying first. I have books, video lectures, practice questions. Is one of these things more effective than the other? Just so many questions that go through your mind about how you even use the study materials. And this is something that actually trips up a lot of candidates before they can even get into testable content and studying and looking at practice questions and study guides and such. It's a struggle to know where to even start. So the first thing is to get familiar with how the content is categorized with your study materials, which should be consistent with the CPA exam blueprints. For each section, I'll use FAR as an example. You may have in your course materials 10 sections for FAR, and each of them talks about a different section: the standard setting bodies, accounting standards, account select financial statement accounts, and then it goes into the individual accounts, whether it's revenue or AP and equity and all of those things. And so once you get familiar with that, then you can start to get a feel for how much content you're dealing with. First of all, from a quantity perspective, FAR tends to be the heaviest with content. It tends to have the most chapters, the most things to read, understand, know, and do. And so once you have that laid out, then you can say, okay, how do I best learn? And that's a perfect segue into the next thing I want to talk about. But before I move on, I do want to say, just keep these organizational things in mind when you're figuring out what to use, because just because you have something as far as your course materials is concerned, you don't have to use everything if it's repetitive. And as I jump into the next point of figuring out how you best learn. So as I said earlier, usually the chapters are a regurgitation of what the video lectures are. So if you are a person who learns by reading and highlighting and taking notes, the chapters might be good for you. If you're a person who feels like, I need to see the video, I need the instructor to use a whiteboard and really walk through the questions for me and help me understand the concepts, then the video lectures might be better for you. But in most cases, 99% of the time, what you're seeing in the video lecture is the same as what you're seeing in the books. It's just a written version of that. So keep that in mind when you're figuring out how you best learn, because studying for the CPA exam is not the same as studying for an exam in college. So you cannot apply your traditional learning style to this non-traditional exam. And just to give you context of how non-traditional it is, it's not even possible to get a 100 on the CPA exam. The most you can get is a 99. So figuring out how you best learn. Do you learn by reading, by watching, by doing? Maybe a combination of those, but most people have one dominant learning style. For me, I can learn by reading something if it's instructions or something like that, but I'm most effective when I'm actually doing it and trying to figure it out. So, and sometimes watching a video. Sometimes I might be reading instructions and I say, you know what? I don't want to read. I just want a video where they can get right to the point and help me figure it out. So it really depends. And like I said, I know that I'm most effective when I learn by doing. So when I first started studying, I started with the questions. I went straight to the multiple choice questions. I wanted to know what they were asking, what type of content or topics that the questions focused on. And then I wanted to look at what are the answer choices to see. I'm trying to figure out how to word this. I was looking at the answer choices, like I want to see if when I'm thinking, do the examiners know what I'm thinking, basically? Because sometimes you'll be looking at a question and you think you know the answer and you pick that answer and it's wrong. And then it's like, well, why did I get that wrong? And then once you start looking at the explanations about why the right answer is right and why the wrong answer is wrong, it's like, oh, okay. So the examiners know. I did some practice questions on FAR where I walk through this same type of scenario. I don't know why I can't put words around it right now. It's probably easier to explain if I shared one of the tutorials I did where I walked through a practice exam question. But basically, when you get the wrong answer, like it's kind of like the wordplay where the examiners will add words to the questions or put something in there that they know is blatantly wrong as bait, and see if you'll take the bait and pick the wrong answer is where I'm going with that. But in practice, even though it feels like torture on the exam, in practice, this prepares you for paying attention to details, number one. But number two, a lot of times in accounting, you're trying to make decisions and you're trying to tell a business story. And this is a good exercise in dealing with a lot of information and being able to sift through that information and pull out what's relevant and what's not. So yes, some of the wordplay and all of that feels like torture as a candidate when you're studying and you're trying to master these concepts. But I am here to tell you that embrace that part of studying, because it makes you a stronger accountant when you can pay attention to details and you're not one of those people who get hit with what we call analysis paralysis, that you're staring at reports and files and financial statements for so long that it's not adding value and it's not telling a story. It's like, okay, I have all this information. It's good to have all of this information, but how can I make this information useful and valuable to the stakeholders, to my, if you're working at a company, how do I make this valuable to my CFO and my accounting leadership team? If you're an entrepreneur or you plan on starting your own tax or accounting firm once you get your license, then how can I tell the story to my client who's a business owner who's trying to figure out if they need to increase the price of their products, or how can we improve their margins, or can we look at their OPEX and see some trends and look at where we need to make cuts? So that's where this part of the process is something that I say, don't look at it as being so stressful and such a burden, but embrace the fact that even though this is uncomfortable right now, you are setting yourself up to be a strong accountant when it counts, which is after you pass the exam, not if you pass the exam, but when. So after you pass the exam, when you have your license, and when now you have to go out and show what you can do and you have a chance to demonstrate your expertise. That's where studying, learning the concepts, and embracing this journey that you're on gives you a really good foundation to become not just another accountant out here, but somebody who can stand out from the crowd and say, listen, I know that 2 + 2 = 4, but if you're trying to go from 4 to 7, here's what we can do. Or if 2 + 2 = 4, but you really intended it for it to be 3, here's some adjustments that you need to make operationally. That's where the value comes in. Anybody can look at a financial statement and say, oh yeah, we made $5 million this month. But the value comes in the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why behind that $5 million. And that's where the value of a CPA really comes into play. And that's what we get paid for. We get paid to be able to decipher these numbers and tell the story and help our clients and our stakeholders and our community entrepreneurs make the right decisions for their business. So I know that was the point was figure out how you best learn, but I felt the need to share that and really emphasize the fact that this is a short-term thing. Emphasize the fact that even though it feels uncomfortable now, it is going to be such a great feeling when you finally get credit for that last section and you pass the exam. So figure out how you best learn. That's usually a hindrance to candidates studying. As an instructor and a CPA exam coach, I work with candidates all the time who say, I read the chapter and then I watched the videos and I went back and highlighted the chapter and I did the practice questions and I got all the questions wrong, or I forgot what I read. And the reason for that is because reading something and understanding something is two different things. Moving on. Organizing your study materials. It also depends on what you have going on. And I specifically wanted to provide CPA exam coaching and advice and support through this method as a podcast. I specifically wanted it to be the audio portion of my coaching program. Let's forget the whiteboards and the tutorials for a minute. For a minute. I don't edit my podcast, y'all, so that little blip will be in there. But I wanted it to be in this format as a podcast versus a video so that you could do other things that you need to do. I love listening to podcasts when I'm cooking, when I'm writing, creating content, when I'm cleaning up. And so I realized that not everybody has the time or just the freedom to be sitting in front of a video. If you're driving, if you're one of those people who are commuting back and forth to the office all the time, if you're driving or on the subway or on the train, then this is something that you can listen to without having to have a device in front of your face. And so I wanted this to be available and that you didn't have to interrupt your day or your schedule and feel like you're compounding your course materials with something else. I really want this to be your time well spent and invested in getting these tips and these insights from me, from somebody who has been in your shoes 13 times over. So I know the feeling. So talking about what you have, books, videos, thousands of practice questions, maybe the flashcards. And of course, you have to have the CPA exam blueprints. Hopefully, if you are in the midst of studying for a section, audit, BEC, reg, or FAR, you have already looked at the CPA exam blueprints to get familiar with the topics that can be tested on the exam. So don't forget about those, because the CPA exam blueprints need to be an integral part of all of this. They are issued by the AICPA. They were recently updated. The examiners tend to make updates at least once a year to the blueprint. So it's important to make sure you have the most current version of those. That's the guide of what topics are testable on the CPA exam and how much content you can expect to see on your exam. There's also a module, or I think a video. Yeah, I did a tutorial about how to use the blueprints and the recent changes to those blueprints. So if you check out the CPA exam virtual classroom, it should be uploaded in there somewhere. If it's not, let me know. Send me an email, CPA Exam at winstoncpagroup.com. I believe we put it out there, but if it's not, I'll make sure it's out there for y'all. But just want to recap some things really quickly. Well, not really quickly, because I'm not a fan in rushing through things. But I want to talk through the type of things you'll have in your course materials and give you some more things to think about as you try to figure out, how do I get organized so I can focus less on being overwhelmed with materials and focus more on learning content and learning accounting and getting ready for the exam. So, if you're a reader, again, you like to highlight stuff, go with the chapters. If you like the whiteboards and you need to jot down stuff, go with the videos. Whichever one you choose between the reading the chapters or watching the lectures, I recommend that after 30 minutes or so of studying, that you pause, you take a break, and you take in what you've just learned. Because what you don't want to do is digest too much content all at once and then you forget everything that you learn. So if you are studying FAR and you're on the select financial statements section, if you look at if you're looking at revenue and learning about revenue, and then you're about to jump into learning about cost of goods sold or OPEX or something like that, take a break between each section and jot down a few things that you've learned about revenue. The who, what, the where, when, the why. Something if you're like, okay, what should I know about revenue? You should know how it's presented in the financial statements. You should know which financial statement it's on, which is the P&L or the income statement. You should understand other components that impact the revenue balance, coupons, sales discounts, returns, things like that. So understanding the basics of each account before you move on to another section. Another thing that's helpful before you move on to another section is, once you've gotten through one concept, go ahead and do those practice questions for that specific concept and see if what you have learned can be translated to you picking the right answers if you were to see these type of questions on the exam. Speaking of practice questions, there are tons of MCQs, tons of multiple choice questions and simulations, and that can be overwhelming because candidates feel like they're not ready for the exam unless they've gotten through all 10,000 questions. And this is not accurate. So don't stress yourself out if you're thinking that. I recommend the candidates, like I said before, what I did is I would do the practice questions first because I like to learn by doing. So I would go to the test bank, pick about 10 questions on a topic, and then that gave me an idea of how well I did or did not know that particular topic. But also, it gives you a preview of what the topics in the lecture or in the chapter that you read will be about. So then you can start to frame your thinking around this concept, the key terms, what to look for in the questions, especially when you're trying to duck and dodge the wordplay from the examiners. Then after you finish reading or listening to a chapter, go back and redo those same multiple choice questions and see if your comprehension has improved and if you're able to answer more questions correctly now that you've gone back and learned some details from reading the chapter or listening to the lecture. After that, if the topic still does not make sense, do not spend weeks trying to figure that one thing out. If you go through this process where you're reading the chapter or watching the lecture and you're doing the multiple choice questions and that still is not making sense, you're not getting it, start keeping a list of the topics that you're struggling with. Add that topic to the list because the goal is to get through all of the content so that you at least see it. You can always come back to a topic later. So as you keep going through the material, You might even learn something that helps that other topic make sense that you're struggling with. So, for example, if you feel like I'm struggling with COGS, but then you move on to learn about accounts payable, learning about accounts payable might help you better understand the COGS balance and how it impacts that. So if you had COGS on your list of things that you needed to study and learn more about, then you can probably check it off the list to say, okay, now that I've gotten further along in the content, that topic that I didn't understand a few weeks ago, it kind of make more sense now because I'm now reading and learning about something that's related to that. If that makes sense. I hope it does. If it does not, let's talk. So those are the individual sections. Each time you finish an area, like there's area 1, area 2, area 3, area 4, each time you finish an area, treat that as a time for you to do a mini exam, a mini practice exam. And what I mean by that is go into the test bank, select all of the subtopics in that area. So select, if you have area 4 that you're looking at for a particular section, select every question in area 4 and then do maybe 25 or 30 questions. The testlets, I think the testlets are like 30-ish questions, between 33 questions or something like that. So pick 30, 35 questions from a section and then do a couple of simulations. It doesn't matter what the score is at this point in the game, because the goal of this exercise is to get you into a rhythm of how the exam might look and also how simulations are worded. The biggest thing I hear about simulations from candidates is that they say that they run out of time on simulations, or once they get through the multiple choice questions and then they click on that next testlet, which is the first simulation, that the simulation looks foreign, like something they've never seen, or it feels overwhelming. Like, okay, when I did the practice simulations when I was studying, this is not how the sims look. Like, these look super overwhelming. So now the problem isn't the content. It isn't what you know. The problem is, can I get through this? Do I understand what they're asking me to do on this simulation? And then you stare at that screen while the clock is just ticking away and you're down to the wire, trying not to run out of time. So as you study and you go through and you do the practice questions, don't just do the multiple choice questions. Make sure that from day one, you are looking at those simulations, the document reviews, the research questions, the different types of simulations that you might see. And there are tutorials on each of these types of simulations in the virtual classroom. I know that those videos are uploaded. So make sure you check those out if you want to figure out, hey, if I get a research question, what's the best way to answer that? And there's a couple other types of simulations that I walk through live just to do a screen share and show you how it might look and give you some pointers on what to do if you get stumped in the middle of a simulation. So, wanted to talk about today the fact that you've invested in these study materials, and even though you don't have any direction on how to use it, that was the goal of this conversation. To show you how to use your study materials, how to organize your study materials, and even after that, to give you a type of rhythm that you can adopt as you go through studying for each section. If you get jammed up on the topic, do not worry about trying to learn that one thing right now, because there's three multiple choice testlets. I'm trying to imagine the exam and the format, but most of them have at least 3 multiple choice testlets. Each have anywhere from 30 to 35 questions. So that's less than 100 multiple choice questions. If you just do the math and think about you'll have to answer a total of 100 multiple choice questions, but you think about the thousands of practice questions that you see. That math alone tells you that not every single thing that you see is going to be tested. Or if it is, it's not going to be tested. It's not going to be 50% of your exam. So the good thing here is to try to be the jack of all trades when it comes to studying for the CPA exam. We love to be masters of one. It's not about trying to be a subject matter expert on just financial statement accounts, and you can say, I know every single thing in area 4, but I haven't gotten to section 5, so I don't even know what section 5 is about. The goal is to at least get through all of your study materials, and along the way, as you find things that you feel like, I don't get this, or I need to go a little bit deeper into this, make a note, keep a list of topics that you struggle with. And then once you get through the end of your materials, you can go back and do specific study sessions on those things. But another thing that I hear from candidates, and one thing that I actually did myself when I was studying for audit for the first time, is that we tend to get hung up on topics, and we'll stay on those same topics for 2 and 3 weeks at a time, knowing that our exam day is coming. And then the exam day comes and you feel like, well, there were 8 modules, but I only got through 6 or 7. And then you get a multiple choice question, or you get a simulation asking you about a topic that you don't know anything about because you didn't make it through all of the study materials. So that's why I talk about the importance of, from day one, organizing your study materials, because it's easy to get overwhelmed with the content, but it is a disaster to be overwhelmed with trying to learn CPA exam content and you are disorganized and your study materials are in disarray. That is a recipe for disaster. So I like to keep these episodes short and sweet. So again, whatever you are doing, I hope this was a well invested 30-ish minutes of your time, and that it has empowered you to get back to studying, organizing your materials, and really learning accounting, so that after you pass this exam, you are ready to put on your cape and jump out into this industry and be the superstar that we all know that you are. So next time we're going to talk about defining, or in the case of those of you who may be retaking exams, we're going to talk about defining or redefining your exam timeline. How much do you need to study for FAR? How many weeks or months should you study for reg or audit or BEC? There's no right or wrong answer to that question, but there's so many things that we have to think about when we start trying to put a timeline in place and scheduling exams and still trying to have a life and all of that. So that's the next episode, but thank you for tuning into this one. Make sure that you visit the CPA Exam virtual classroom as a member to access all of the content library, the exam strategies, the simulation tutorials, the study guides, all of the things that I've put together for y'all there. So happy studying. Y'all be good. We'll talk soon. Thank you again for tuning in and rocking with me on another episode of the WERKin Mommas podcast. This podcast is the business plan for entrepreneurs, the how-to and WTF guide for busy moms, and the coattail pulling career advice that professionals need to win in the corporate world. I'm Nikki Winston. I am a mama. I'm a CPA and a career development expert who put all the what ifs aside and launched my podcast. Do you love this content? If so, I would love for you to help create more of it. Support the WERKin Mommas podcast at buymeacoffee.com/Nick Winston CPA. When you go to the site, click on the support button, and from there you can buy as many cups of coffee or tea as you like. And feel free to leave a comment while you're there. Tell me what you like the most about the WERKin Mommas podcast. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/Nick Winston CPA and help create more of the content you love. If you're a CPA candidate, you can join the Winston CPA Exam virtual classroom online at winstoncpagroup.com/CPA Exam. Business owners, get answers to accounting and tax questions and how to form your LLC or corporation at winstoncpagroup.com/business. Are you a professional working in the corporate world? Well, there's career advice and tools that you need to elevate your leadership skills. Click on the career advice page of winstoncpagroup.com or go to winstoncpagroup.com/career advice. And of course, for the busy, overworked moms, there is a place where we understand your struggle. Join the WERKin Mommas community for cleaning hacks, quick meals that are nutritious and kid approved, and all things mom life at theworkinmommas.com. We also have a Pinterest board that's called Supercharged Self-Care that all the moms love. So check out our mom life tips over on Pinterest.com/theworkinmommas. And of course, if you are not already, you can follow me online on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Nick Winston CPA. Connect with the WERKin Mommas online at theworkinmommas.com, as well as on the Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn pages. Thank you again. It has been fun, and my podcast is a labor of love for me. So I appreciate every single solitary person who is tuning in, and I look forward to you coming back to rock with me on another episode of the WERKin Mommas podcast.